Welcome to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 28-minute slot every Friday where I talk a little bit about my pet subject, which is mental health, and specifically depression and bipolar, which I suffer from, and bring you a little story from my adventures around the world and the times in my life where I was in a much better state. Mentally, I was in a much better place, and I had some amazing adventures, and I met some wonderful people, and I guess it's fair to say that they shaped me. They taught me a lot, and that's what makes a difference. And I want you to think about this today, to consider this, that every child is born beautiful and innocent, and what they become is up to us. That you have the power to make a difference. You might think that you don't. You might think that you're relatively powerless, but what you say and what you do to other people has a massive impact. It ripples out. One little bit of goodness, a little bit of kindness can make an immense difference in somebody's life if they are struggling and they are suffering. And it costs you nothing, just a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of thoughtfulness towards someone who is suffering. You can make such a difference to someone's life, and it costs you absolutely nothing. And if you do a little bit of good for others, it makes you feel better about yourself. It makes you good, and I want you to think about that next time you meet someone who's suffering from depression. Don't be disingenuous about this. Speak from the heart and just say something kind. You don't have to go on about it, just one little thing. And that can make such a huge difference in people's lives. When people are suffering from mental illness, it's not necessarily forever. You can help them pull back out of that. And if it's a close friend of yours, and you stick by them, that can be one of the most beautiful friendships, to know that you've hauled someone out from a pit of despair and help put them back together again and make their life. And they will be your friends, loyal as dogs for the rest of your life, if you can pick someone up. And what a wonderful thing, what a wonderful thing to do. So, yeah, I encourage you to be that difference maker. Right, I've got a great song for you today, a real rock and roller. You're going to love it. John Bonham at his very, very best. Arguably the finest drummer that ever lived. Excuse me a second. Oh, I hate that when that happens. I wish I had to turn that damn thing off. This is what happens with live radio, just one of those things. Modern technology, it's just such a it's such a problem sometimes. Here we go. She's off, and we won't be disturbed again by my little friend Guy. Righto, we're going to rock on with today's story. This one here, my friends, is called A Big Tusker. It was a great day, and I hope you enjoy the story. The old mate, Tom, and I had been on the trail of a big boar for the last 2 days. Tom allows few others to hunt the 1,000 acres he lives on, so some of the boars get to a huge size. It is a rare privilege to be allowed to hunt a trophy animal, and we were hell-bent on bagging this one. Day one, we came across the sign we were looking for, with rooted-up thistles, a boar favourite, and shit the size of Coke cans. The dogs stuck to their task well and found the mob late in the day, but were unable to stop them. A single piglet, too small to be of consequence, was all we had to show, despite our best efforts. Despite our initial failure, we became more determined to snare this huge beast. He would undoubtedly be sporting a huge set of tusks or hooks to match his size, and this was the prize we were truly after. We were also determined that the dogs should know what their main task in life is. Only a boar will truly test the mettle of a dog, be he finder or bailer. They must stick to the task and come through with the result, hopefully unharmed. Injury and even death is not uncommon for the dogs, but they love this life, and they live for the days hunting in the bush. We had 5 dogs for the job, two finders, Havoc and Quinn, who were half-brothers, Havoc black and tan and Quinn the grey. Both light-boned and fast over the ground. They can cover vast distances over steep terrain and are ideally suited to the land. Between them they have flushed many huge hogs, the hooks of which are now displayed around the house, nailed to posts as trophies. Despite the lack of result on day one, we were confident success was only a matter of time. The other three dogs we had were our bailers. Old Bob, who was Havoc and Quinn's dad, now getting on in years and injuries. He was near retirement, but still has a great temperament and is handy in a good scrap. Then there is young Meg, the half-sister of Havoc and Quinn. Yet to be tested, we're hoping she will take the lead from her older brothers. So we must have her on the leash for a bit whilst the find is on. For a bit of muscle, we have added Fugly to the ranks. He is a true bailer, a mongrel pit bull type, typically short in the stride and tough in a fight. His name is short for Effin Ugly, due to his scars. We're probably a little light on bailers for a big mob, but Tom knows the land well and can swing us round upwind of a mob of pigs most times. So far, our prey has managed to elude us with a combination of luck, smarts and cunning, but time and the weather are on our side. At the end of day one, we retire home empty-handed, having left the piglet in the bush. The dogs are uninjured and show only a little fatigue after a full day's hunt. Tom and I only give them a little food and water, as we need them on top form for day two. After watering the animals in their kennels, Tom and I retire for a good feed, a few smokes, and tell a few fibs before an early bedtime, ready for a 5 o'clock start the next morning. Day two is still dark and misty as we check over the gear for the next morning's hunt. We travel light with only a sticking knife, binoculars, some twine, a water bottle, and Tom's trusty Winchester 30-30 lever-action rifle. Short and powerful, it is our trusty weapon for dropping big boars in tight spots. Kitted up, we let the barking, excited dogs out of their kennels and they tear around like excited children, marking everything they can. As Tom kicks over the quad bike and I mount side saddle, the dogs jostle for a posse on the back tray, or fall in behind us as we descend the drive, with the headlights cutting through the dark. At first light, we dismount the quad bike, and again in silence, we pick up the trail of the mob and follow down into the still damp bush, all wet, dark and spooky. Tracking down from an upwind position, the odds are well stacked in the finder's favour. Soon the finders are on the trail, but the mobs now seem spooked after yesterday's harassment, and staying moving ahead of the dogs. As the morning wears on, we make contact a couple of times without a successful bail. Over one ridge after another they lead us on a merry chase, without any real contact until the heat of the day forces us to take a break and rest the dogs, who return to us reluctantly. Over our lunch break we discuss how to get back above and upwind of the mob, how we can force them down to the bottom creek if they break, and have a final crack at them down there. Around 1 o'clock we walk up the fire breaks until we are well above and upwind of the mob. First we send off the two finders, followed by the bailers 10 minutes later, in the hope that the pack will hit the mobs simultaneously. At around 2 o'clock, despite the heat, we finally hear barking down at a wallow we found yesterday. It is a long way down from where we are, and as we run down we hear a break over another ridge and a second bail. We are forced to swim our way through bracken and fallen trees, and I am thankful for the short rifle. We push on hard and finally come across 3 dogs attached to a good-sized sow. Being stretched 3 ways, she has little chance of escape, and I am able to reach in between 2 dogs and tip her up by grabbing a hind leg. Tom is then able to stick it as I hold it on its back. The sow is dispatched of with all efficiency and its suffering is minimised. When gutted, all of its innards still quiver and pulse with ebbing energy. Although not the intended target, it is a good size, some 60 to 70 kilos, and makes for a hard haul up a ridgeline, till at last I collapse out onto the fire break. To conserve energy, we decide to walk back to the quad bike and drive back to the carcass. Only 3 dogs returned to us, with the 2 finders still out after the boar, so we decide to wait up top in the hope they will manage to stop him and perhaps finish the day off brilliantly. After a couple of hours, the finders return, their necks and faces covered in blood, but without any obvious injuries. All the dogs have come through to the end of the day unscathed, and we have to satisfy ourselves with a good-sized sow. We are more determined than ever to corner the big boar, although the mob have now become wary and skittish. We return home, tired, but still with plenty of light left in the day. We kindle the dogs, singe the pig, then Tom dresses the carcass in the chill house where it is left to set. We spend the rest of the afternoon preparing a big feed, smoking and drinking coffee. After dinner, we clean the rifle and go over the plan for day 3 before heading to bed, not long after dark. Alrighty, halfway through, and I'm going to give you all a bit of rock and roll. One of the finest songs ever written. When that blues harp kicks in 3/4 of the way through, it rocks my socks, and I hope it does you too. Enjoy.
Nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's for mine. all but mine.
Sure hope you enjoyed that. I am a child of the 60s and rock and roll is in my soul. Those boys came out in 68 and, man, dynamite. The great Jimmy Page and the magnificent John Bonham, who unfortunately drank himself to death. What a loss. I hope you enjoyed that song. Right, let's kick on. This is The Big Tusker. Day 3, we made another start before dawn. The dogs have no injuries and have lost none of their enthusiasm, tearing around like kids at play. We let them calm down a bit before we head off. Cool heads are required today if we are to finally get on to the Big Tusker. We decide to ride as little as possible today and walk in a few kilometres so as not to spook the mob. It is a slow trudge along the fire breaks, taking in a butte sunrise and mist rise off the bush. Birds are about everywhere. Insects hum and a light breeze of about 10 knots is again in our favour. We have a pretty good idea of where the pigs will be and which way they are likely to break, as the mob seems to follow roughly the same journey daily, up near the tops in the cool of the morning and working down to a wallow, then down to a flat creek near the bottom of the property in the late afternoon. I am tired of the slog, but the prospect of a battle with the elusive boar keeps me going. The dogs have lost none of their enthusiasm and Tom seems to be taking it all in his stride. The finders start to sweep and a couple of hours tick by as our wary adversaries continue to elude us. At around 9 o'clock we finally hear a high-pitched bark as a finder suddenly strikes a mob down near the wallow. We are quickly in pursuit, just behind the balers, and I feel a renewed energy as I draw near the ensuing action. We hear the engagement break off, then restart over the next ridge. The going is steep, but I am driven on by what I am sure is a deep grunt and then a squeal. We come up over the ridge to witness an all-in brawl on a steep slip face covered in flax. 3 dogs are onto a massive hog, well in excess of 120 kilos. The boar is holding his own, backing up the face and using his hooks to good advantage, keeping the dogs out in front of him. They cannot swing him round on the steep face, and Tom tries to whistle up the other 2 dogs, hoping to use numbers to overwhelm this Goliath. The slip face is too steep for us to get on, and the dogs do their best to drive him to us, but the bull continues to back up and thrash his vicious-looking tusks at the dogs. Finally, the other 2 dogs turn up and enter the fray. The dogs are fearless, despite the huge and dangerous adversary. Slowly, superior numbers start to tell, and the dogs get to the boar's hind quarters to give him a good stretch. The big hog simply grunts and thrashes around wildly, refusing to move from the safety of the slip face where he has more advantage. Mid-fight, Fugly is sent tumbling down the face, only to come roaring back up, and old Bob gets a hook in the guts, but is nimble enough to avoid serious injury. Tom and I are helpless bystanders until the dogs can force the boar off the slip face, as it is far too steep for us and too dangerous for us to attempt shooting the beast with all the dogs on him. Despite the attentions of 5 willing dogs, the boar has us as a stalemate. He cannot back up much farther, and the dogs cannot turn him, and we cannot assist the dogs. The dogs, however, show their grit, and an hour-long battle ensues where no quarter is given, and I fear for the safety of the hounds. It would be a hell of a place to have to get an injured dog from. As the battle wears on, the big tusker slowly begins to tire, and the dogs begin to gain ascendancy, constantly attacking from all quarters with great tenacity, and they begin to pry him from the slip face. Driving him from the hind quarters, they work the boar towards us on the ridge. Suddenly realising that he is beaten, the boar makes a dash for the gap between us and the dogs, but Tom is ready and draws a bead on the boar and peels off a shot as the pig reaches the ridge. The big tusker is felled by a beautiful heart-lung shot and lets out a grunt as he collapses on the ridge. The dogs pile in, their blood still up, and we pull them off as the life drains from their adversary. At last we get to see the beast up close, and I am disappointed to see that his tusks are uneven. A nice large even set is preferable. Still, they are a pretty impressive set. Got to go 100 kilos gutted, muses Tom, as he calms the dog and draws his knife. We gut the pig on the ridge as he is too big to move elsewhere, the carcass being nearly as long as us, about 6 foot or 190 centimetres. Let's just take the head, I suggest hopefully, but Tom will have none of it. There are back stakes for us, a good photograph, and a load of dog tucker to be considered. So we tie the front and rear trosses together, and between us begin the arduous pull up the ridgeline. We have to stop a few times, battling the heat and the steepness of the ridge, but finally collapse exhausted onto the fire break. The elation of finally capturing our foe gives us renewed energy as we stroll back to the quad bike with all the dogs in tow. Though old Bob took a poke and Fugly is smashing, the dogs are relatively unharmed and seem calm and very pleased with themselves. After an hour, we reach the quad bike and drive back to the boar with the dogs in tow. We have difficulty tying the huge boar on the back, and I must sit on the front to counterbalance the huge weight. We motor back slowly in the heat of the day like a couple of excited kids. Our quarry, though imperfect, is a real trophy and would win many a competition. Apart from its size, it has one large tusk and one broken one. It will make a fine addition to our Hall of Fame back at Tom's place. We arrive back in the afternoon for the obligatory photo session. With the pig on his back, the hog's backside nearly touches the ground, such is the length of the tusker. We hang it in the chill house with the sow from the day before, both singed and ready to be butchered. We then kennel the weary dogs with well-earned praise and a good feed of pig. Soon a brew and a feed are underway, and we settle down to clean the rifle and chat about the last few days, how the dogs did and what we could have done better. The elation of success still glowing warm in our tired bodies. After a shower, we cook up a big feed for tea, then sit on the porch smoking and telling stories till we fall asleep. I stumble off to bed, my head full of dreams of pig hunting that will replay themselves for years to come. The end. Oh, mighty fine. 2 minutes to spare. I like that. I hope you enjoyed that story, and I know that pig hunting is not really everybody's cup of tea, but it is an amazing sport, and you don't get to do it too often anywhere in the world, and luckily my old mate Tom is a real expert. He's been hunting now for a good 40 years, so he really knows his stuff, and it's always a privilege to go out with someone who is a top-notch hunter, and I learned so much from my mate Stu. So thank you, Stu, for all that. It was a hell of an adventure. I lived out on the Tora coast for a year. We did commercial fishing, and when it was too rough to go fishing, we'd go pig hunting, and it was an amazing life to live off the land like that, and a real privilege. Not something I would want to do my whole life, but for some people, that special life is the only life for them, and I do admire them. They're tough buggers. You've got to be hard to live off the land, and you've got to be very resourceful, and he most certainly is. Well, 1 minute, so I'm just going to sign off. Say thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed my story. I love those stories. I loved writing them, and I love reading them. It makes me relive some of the greatest days of my life, and I'd just like to end by saying, if you know anyone who's suffering from depression, from mental health, be that difference maker. It's really up to you. People with mental illness, all they really need is a kind thought, a kind word, and that can turn it around for them. So if you can, do that. Thank you very much, and we will catch you again next week. Special thanks to our sponsors. Thank you very much for getting involved and helping us out. T.G. McCarthy Trust, thank you ever so much. And Michael and Veronica here, wonderful, thank you. Catch you next week. Bye for now.